Did you have Jalen Hurts as the first to score a touchdown in Super Bowl 59? I didn't either. Today, I've got a guy on the phone who once scored the first touchdown in a Super Bowl. Big Ten Network's Howard Griffith is going to join me to talk about the draft, the combine, and changes in college football. If you love wagering on college and pro sports, install the BetRivers app today and let the journey begin. Have some fun, peruse it, see what you can get on player props, on season totals. Get your bets in now for Cubs and White Sox futures. It's all happening at BetRivers.
You're now watching the Danny Mac Podcast on the BetRivers Network.
Everybody is buzzing about the NFL Combine. Until we get to the draft, that's all we have. Get me to the three-cone drill. I can't get enough of this stuff. Howard Griffith from the Big Ten Network joins me today, the former Super Bowl champion. Hell, I shouldn't say Howard. A former Super Bowl champ. Once you're a Super Bowl champ, they never take that away from you. Thanks for
I don't
the
think
time
so.
today. It is yours forever and cannot be taken away. I put out a poll on Twitter the other day asking Bears fans what they want with the 10th pick, and 82% of them said offensive lineman.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a pretty decent draft for O-linemen. Can they get a franchise rock at number 10 who is solidified at a position? I get nervous when I hear, oh, he's versatile. He can play guard. He can play tackle. He can center in a pinch. No, give me a guy who kicks it at one position.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When I think I have to agree with Bears fan, you need to get that offensive lineman. It can be a mainstay for 10 years. It doesn't have the health concerns that these maybe had some injuries in previous years, been able to stay healthy. But I think the biggest thing, one of the things that happens when you go through this process, particularly when you're drafting, say in the top 10, the top 5, people get enamored with athleticism. And I get it, because not every, there are great athletes out there, the explosive athletes. They have those athletes that, can run as an offensive line, can run sub 5 flat and can jump and have all that athleticism. But to me, at that position, what's most important is that you have a football player. And that's really what you need. And I think one of the things that happens, particularly when you go through this process, starting with, at the combines, is people start to look at just how athletic football players can be, and they get enamored with that. I think when you're picking this high, you need to get a guy that is a football player that can get nasty, and maybe he's not as fast as another guy and doesn't put up all the great combine numbers, but when you turn on the film, you know exactly what you have, and you've seen that consistency over his time at the college level and being able to battle through things and playing against some really good, defensive linemen at that position. But you're right. Don't get me the guy that can play center when you need him to. I need, that left tackle. When you start to look at that high, you want a tackle that can really be able to solidify some things. And then maybe there are some other guys that you can go after in free agency to start to build inside.
I hear many people suggest it's too much to ask of a rookie to come in and play center if the expectations are high, especially with a young quarterback. Is that valid? Is there something to that, or is that overstating it?
Yeah, I think the elite centers that are out there, and I think that's where you go and you start to look at, well, what were they asked to do at the college level? Were they asked to identify the Mike linebacker or the strong side, or were they making the calls to turn the line, and where they were collaborating with that quarterback and making sure that the offensive line is turning the right way? Because the reality is, if you're playing center, you need to make sure those 5 guys are heading in the same direction and not one going one way and going the other. So if you can look at what his workload was like, what his study habits were like, the type of systems that he was able to adapt to me, it's not that much to ask, because if you have some rocks playing guard that are going to be able to help them out, and you have even backs in the backfield, there are a lot of situations where you can help that center out and really put them in good position. It's about really finding the best person to fit what your system is able to do. And that's why I think when you go through this process, you don't get it enamored, as I mentioned earlier, about all this athleticism and what that upside. There's so much upside in them. I don't really care about upside when you got a young quarterback. You need people that can play and play right now and contribute. So yes, you can. In some ways, you can sit there from the outside and look in and say, hey, maybe that's too much to be putting on one guy. But now in today's NFL and today's college athletics, there's a lot that's being put on these guys in the first place. And if you're picking the right one that's going to fit your system, you should be okay. There'll be growing pains, but you'll be okay.
The combine has changed dramatically since 1990, 91 when you came into the league, Howard, and now everybody gets to watch on NFL Network, which I think is terrific alternative programming, especially in Chicago when you don't want to watch basketball or hockey.
Yes.
At least that's what I'm told, that it's not worth watching, so I'm taking their word for it. Can you talk a little bit about the pressure as a player? Rewind just a few years for us. When you're going to the underwear Olympics, and so much of it is about how you look, man, and how you move, your gait. You're trying to tell people, look at me, this body is worth a lot, man. It's got to be stressful.
Yeah, it absolutely is stressful. And I would tell you this, there's more stress, I think, now than there probably was there then. And one of the reasons why, let me take that back. There's probably less stress now than it was then, because then this was really the first time that a lot of these GMs and a lot of these coaches had an opportunity to be around you. So everything that you did, what the steps you made, the way you communicate, all of those things were taken into account. But now the difference is with social media and these phones, most people feel like they know. They've got a good grasp of what this athlete is about. And you couple that with the guys that are out scouting. There used to be a time where if you were working for the Dolphins, everyone that scouted was living in Miami. And so somebody would have to travel up to the Midwest to start to scout. Now these scouts live regionally. So they may have an opportunity to see a player 3-4 times during that senior campaign before, he or she may have only gotten one shot to see him. But there's still, the pressure is still immense, immense pressure, because one of the things that's happening now is that we have insight into their life. Everyone has a camera, everyone can video and understand what this person has done and the mistakes that you've made. There was a time in college, you could go to college and make all kind of mistakes, and you get to the pros and okay, you matured at that point. But now with these high level athletes, the time they walk into college, for some of these guys, the time that they were in high school, there's been so much pressure and they've been such under the microscope for so long that a lot of them should have figured it out by now, but they still make mistakes, and you hope that they don't make mistakes that really cost them into the future. But there's no doubt about it. The money that's at stake for these athletes, particularly now, is crazy. So they can't have any false steps. They have to have the right communications. They have to give the right answer, and they have to give the right answer to some trick questions that may come up.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the changes that have happened in the college game that trouble you? I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but I'll back off now. What bugs you? Because you were a great college player at the U of I. What bugs you about college football today?
Well, I think one of the things that happens, one of the things that there's so much, and I alluded to this earlier about the pressure that's there. And I'm not so concerned about NIL and the money that these young people are having the opportunity to make, because it's really not their fault. It's the adults in the room, which most of the time it always is, right? When you talk about NIL, there should have been some guardrails that were put up, because NIL, in its true sense, was set up for those individuals who came to the university and all of a sudden created this name and this brand, and they were able to earn that through their play and being a part of whichever university they attend. But what we've seen is it's now an enticement. You look at young people now that are stepping on college campuses, they're saying on their first visit, okay, how much am I being paid? Oh, you're only paying me, and this happens in the transfer portal as well. How much can you pay? And if the number's not there, then it's going to be a short-lived visit. Where you used to spend some time there, you'd spend maybe 2 hours going to academics and doing things like that. It's not that way anymore. This has truly become a business at the high school level with guys that are looking to go to the college ranks, and they're going to, in a lot of situations, the highest bidder. And you're seeing that go on. You're seeing it happen in the transfer portal as well. And people talk about tampering and that sort of thing. And I don't think it's that much tampering. What college athletics has turned into, the recruiting process, is you better recruit that young person as if you're going to sign them. Even if they choose somewhere else and you may end up being the second or the third choice, there is a great possibility that you're going to have another opportunity to recruit that individual back to your university. So in the old days, it would be like, hey, they called you every name under the sun when you chose another place. Now they can't do that because they don't know, maybe in 6 months or 2 years, that young person is going to have an opportunity to be back on that campus and be a quote unquote hired gun to help your program get to the next level.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe his positional coach will yell at him and his feelings will be hurt and he'll need a new home. That transfer portal is great for players, just like the NIL is great for players, but bad for coaches and bad for fans of the sport, man. You need a program anyway with college football with the rapid change, and now with players going to their second and in some cases third schools in 3 years, it's hard to follow it.
Yeah, Mac, it is hard. And it's almost, now as a college fan, you have to be a fan, and I think most are, you have to be a fan of the school that you enjoy, right? And that's who you're going to, if it's Northern Illinois, it's Northwestern Illinois, Notre Dame, whoever it is, you almost have to be a fan of the institution because you know that the names are changing. It used to be they change every 3 to 4 years or 5 years. Now, those names can change after 6 months, after a year. So it's difficult from the fan standpoint to really latch on. And I think the college game, one of the things that I think people really gravitated to it so much is they had an opportunity to watch a young person walk into the door, and then you watch them mature, you watch them kind of buy their time and all of a sudden become this dynamic player if they're that type of a person. But you kind of watch them grow. Even the people that, go on to get their degrees and go off into the professional world, you still had an opportunity to watch that person go through it. Now you don't see it because it's so easy for a young person now to say, you know what, this isn't fit for me anymore. I think I'm going to go somewhere else. And oh, by the way, I know that I could be a starter here next year if I work really hard. It's a 50-50 chance, but I can go be a backup at a big time program that's going to compete for a national championship, and they're going to pay me $300,000 to be a backup. The numbers are crazy and they're insane, but that is the world that we're living in right now. And in college football, it's a lot going on right now in college athletics, but I think for 99% of them, Mac, for 99% of the players that are involved in college athletics, it is still an unbelievable experience for them. There are always going to be some outliers, guys and young people that are going to make tons of cash. But for the majority of the people that are going through that experience, it is an unbelievable deal for them, and they have to be able to take advantage of it. And that's the one thing I hope that they don't get too caught up in, is you start to move around because you're trying to play and you're trying to fit. At some point, you have to realize that, hey, this academic part of it is pretty important too, and I've got to take advantage of it. So, I've seen some guys that have gone to some really prominent academic places, and they've gone there and they went to the first place, the second place, and they didn't get a degree from either one. Now, I know you can go back and get your degree. I know that. But I think the process, you still have to be able to have the eye to be able to see that. Again, there are going to be many good people that will be able, whether it's college hoops that can be one and done, whether you spend 3 years and then you're able to go off to your profession. But for the most part, for most of them, the numbers, they've got to make sure that they still get that education.
Speaking of those great academic institutions, it's been very quiet these last few months, maybe the last 2 years now, on Northwestern's settlement with Pat
Yeah.
Fitzgerald. I was extremely bothered by a lot I read and heard from all directions
Yeah.
during the scandal, Howard.
Mhm.
I don't think anything unearthed, however, merited a death sentence, and I wish somebody would give Pat Fitzgerald a chance to work a sideline because, damn it, he's a good coach, and I think he's earned it.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I don't have a doubt in my mind that Pat Fitzgerald is going to have an opportunity to coach again. Now, it's going to take a little time. I think the main thing that he wants to do is obviously he's focusing on his family. He wants to probably get, I'm saying probably because I'm not reading his mind, but probably get this lawsuit behind him. And then I think you will see him getting another opportunity to be able to be a coach in college football, if not the pros. And because he's just too good at it. I mean, he's one of the, listen, what happened up there is inexcusable. If he knew about it, it's a problem. If he didn't know about it, it's a problem. But I think Pat Fitzgerald, as a man, has built up a lot of goodwill, and I'm not trying to minimize any of the accusations that are out there, but I do understand Pat, and I know him, and I know what type of communicator he is, and I know what type of person he can be, sewing into so many lives as he's already done. So once he can get this lawsuit behind him, hopefully it gets settled soon. I think it would not be surprising to see him back. Maybe not initially as a head coach, but as a position coach and start and work his way back in as a coordinator. But he's absolutely going to be back in coaching if that's something he really wants to do.
Let me bring it back to the Bears, Howard. Lots of excitement with Ben Johnson assuming the reins. A year late, but better late than never. Caleb gets the quarterback whisperer. Do you share the rest of the city's enthusiasm over the $13 million man?
I'm excited about what he has an opportunity to bring. And what I'm also more excited about is the assistants that he's hired. I think one of the things that happens when you have such a veteran team in certain positions, and whether it's a wide receiver, when you have a young quarterback, players have to be coached, and they need to be coached hard. There is no such thing as, we're going to let this guy take a pass because he's been playing in this league for 18 years or for 8 years, and he can be a bit of a problem in the locker room from a standpoint if he's going to do his thing and he's kind of set in his ways. What you've seen Ben Johnson, and I'm excited to see, Antoine Randall back on the sideline. I think he's not far away from being a head coach in the National Football League. Having guys like Eric Bieniemy, and I know he's had his opportunities, he had his ups and downs, but there are guys on this staff that are going to demand that things are done a certain way. And that allows your head coach and Ben Johnson to kind of be the head coach. And those guys can kind of push these guys and push them the way they need to be pushed. And that's not to say that in previous, regimes that hasn't been the case. But I do know the DNA of two of those guys really, really well. And I know that they're not going to stand for anything. The expectation is exactly that. I don't care whether you're a rookie. I don't care whether you're a 10-year vet. If you're supposed to run an 8.5 yard out and you're supposed to plant on that outside foot at 8.5 yards, that's what you're going to do. It's not going to be, I'm comfortable with doing it at 7.5, or I'm comfortable with doing it at 9. Everybody has to be on the same page. And I think when you start to look at the quarterback situation, this is going to be tough because Caleb is so immensely talented. And he's able to make so many plays outside of the system and the scheme that if you're not the right coach, he just is able to just go do his thing because he can make things happen out of nothing. And it's a curse as well, because now as a coordinator and as a coach, you want to be able to say, okay, we're going to pick up 3 yards. It's going to be 2nd and 7 or 2nd and 6. Here's what I'm thinking. Caleb also needs to know this is what I'm thinking. And they have to be one on the same page. And And I think when you see, one of the things you see, right? You see hurry up offense, 2 minute, and you just say, wow, man, we can run 2 minute all day long because the quarterback just has a great feel. He's in a rhythm. But you can't do that. That's not how the game is played, right? And so you have to create that same kind of rhythm when you're not going hurry up, when you're huddling and you're coming and breaking. So I think some of those things are the nuances of the game that Caleb is going to have an opportunity to continue to grow at. But the challenge is you have to make sure, and I think this is why, it's a year late, right? You spend the money and the resource to go in and get the receiver and the quarterback. You would like to mirror your head coach, right, and your coordinator with a talent like that. So you don't spend a year regressing, because that's what's happening. You start to pick up bad habits, as quarterbacks have a tendency to do. They've got to be able to fix that and fix it hard. And he's shown that he's going to be a hard worker and he's going to do what he's asked, but you got to coach them. They have to be coached. Players want to be coached. They want to be challenged. And if you've got the right mix, and this is part of going back to, what happens down at the combine and what goes through a lot of these pre-draft meetings and those sort of things, you got to make sure you have the right people in place to be able to do it. Because we've seen it a couple places, right? We've watched it happen, and what's happened in Detroit. Then you saw what happened in Washington this past year. If the right person is sitting in the front of the room or standing in the front of the room, it brings the best out of everyone. And that's what the Bears have to do, and that's what I believe they have the ability to do with Johnson at the controls now.
Howard, as we wrap it up, and thank you for the time. I enjoyed the visit as always. I did not have Jalen Hurts for the first to score a touchdown in Super Bowl 59. I get that one wrong every year, and a lot of my longtime listeners know where I'm going with this conversation. When Howard was playing fullback for Mike Shanahan's Broncos, the Super Bowl in Miami against the Falcons, Howard went off at, I think, 40 or 50 to 1. He only had 4 carries the entire year. He scored the first touchdown in that Super Bowl, and I was on the outside looking in.
Let me give you a quick backstory. Let me give you a quick backstory on that one, because that was pretty funny. Because leading up to that week, we go through our game plans. We know what's going to happen. So I knew that if the ball was inside the 5-yard line, the first play off the chart was going to be 33 jab. It wasn't going to be a handoff week or a lead to Terrell. We already knew it was coming to me for that very reason, because I hadn't carried the ball and I didn't. So I can remember we went into that game and we had the walkthrough before the game, and we go down, TD and I, and we go and say, okay, we got it on the 3-yard line. 33 jab is up. And we actually ran through that play twice, and because I scored it twice in that game. And we're able to walk away with 2 touchdowns. But another backstory to that, Maxie, it's always something, right? We get back down there again. That was the 3rd time. So you can only believe how excited I am. I'm about to get the ball again. The play's called again in the huddle. We go, 33 jab. All of a sudden, we break the huddle, walk into the line of scrimmage, timeout's called. And I knew exactly what was happening. It's John's last game, because we don't expect him to come back. There are rumors already floating, and we needed to get John a touchdown. We end up going empty backfield, quarterback sneak, and he ends up going over my guy, Mark Lorette, and they scored a touchdown. But I could have had 3 touchdowns in the Super Bowl, but I only walked away with 2. Right?
Oh, Howard, that is so painful. At least somebody thought of it, that Elway is leaving. No one thought of that when the Bears won it in New Orleans in '86. Let Fridge score. Alter's going to play forever. You would have been just the second guy, and it would have been in back-to-back years with a 3-touchdown Super Bowl. Because Terrell did it against the Packers the year before in San Diego, and it's only happened once since. Jalen Hurts scored 3 rushing touchdowns in his first Super Bowl. So you would be walking in some very rarefied. It's still cool to have.
and now you're upsetting me even more, man. Come on, I thought you were my buddy.
All right, let's talk about the 8 touchdowns against SIU in September of that. Howard, thanks for the visit. Always fun.
Hey, anytime. Enjoy seeing you, man. Continued success. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. That's Howard Griffith, the Super Bowl champion from Big Ten Network. Randy Merkin gets me all of these A-list guests for the Danny Mac podcast. Sam Michael is my executive producer. Adam Delavitt, Baby Capone, runs the show at the Bet Rivers Podcast Network. I also thank Troy Mocker and Alex Patton. Have a great weekend. Back with more pre-draft chatter next week. I'm Dan McNeil.